All right, welcome back to the course. So, in today's video, we're going to be looking at objects, everything that has to do with objects. We're going to cover everything in depth. So, at the end of this lecture, you should be familiar with almost everything that you have to do with objects. So, our style of programming will be different. Before, we've been using the browser console and using Node to run our code. But in this case, we're going to be running our code through the HTML channel. You don't have to understand it now, but later we'll dive more into HTML. But just know that this is how you import your JavaScript into HTML, and whatever code you run here. So if I just say hello world right here and save that, then all you need to do is just locate where this file is in your Explorer or your Finder. Then you just open that up. So what we should be looking at is the console. So just right click and look for inspect. Some you might see inspect element, but as long as you see inspect, then just click it and you should see something like this. You should see something like this. Well, what I've done is I've expanded mine because we are not actually dealing with the content of the browser. Our main focus is the console. So just head over to console and you can see that we have our hello world printed up right here. So just know that you are not just limited to writing JavaScript in like using Node as your runner, but the browser is also giving the capability to run your JavaScript code. In fact, that is where JavaScript originated from. It's meant to run on the browser. So we're going to be looking at objects, and I feel like let's write our code in the console. Then later we can go back to our code editor to practice. But I just want to have let's get our hands dirty on objects. So now what is object? Object is a key value per data type. So normally we've seen data types like name, where we say Caleb, for example. And if I log the type of name, you can see that that is a string, right? So we've seen different data types, but now let's say we want to actually model a person. A person has a name, a person has an age. So we say 23. The person has maybe favorite numbers, or we could say lucky numbers. And I'm just gonna set that to 1 and 3. But you can see that I'm actually creating three different variables just to model a person. Wouldn't it be cool if we can just have just one variable that has everything that has to do with that person? Well, an array might come to mind. But an array doesn't actually model a person because it just holds a list of items in a list. So that doesn't cut it for us. So what would make sense is if we can have a data type whereby we could just list properties and give them the value. So in this case, the key is now a property. So how do we define objects in JavaScript? So there are two ways to define objects. There's the object literal and there is the object constructor. So we're going to be looking at both ways of doing that. So using the object literal, all you need to do is just say obj, short for object. So this is the object literal. So when you use a curly bracket like this, opening and closing, then you've created an object. So this is the literal. Then another one, I'll just create another object. I'll call it obj2. We can use the object constructor. So in this case now we're using something called object-oriented programming, using the new keyword to create a new instance of the object class, calling the constructor. Now it sounds like garbage and a lot of jargons, but please just understand that there are two ways to create objects. So this is using the constructor. So if I look to the console, the type of obj, you see it's a type of object. So we know that whenever we create something like this, it's an object. Let's try the type of obj2, and that also gives you an object. So it doesn't actually matter in which form you choose to create your object, but throughout this course, I'm going to be using this method, the object literal, and it's pretty much what most developers use, because it's you're just actually writing two symbols instead of writing this whole thing right here. All right, cool. So now let's create our object. Let's model a person. So I'm just going to create a constant, call it person, and I'm going to model a person. So a person has a name, and I'm just going to put the name as John. A person has, oops, all right, let's try that again. So I'm just going to refresh so we have a clean slate. So create a constant person, and let's model a person. So a person has a name. I will call the person John. Now, if I click enter, it's actually going to execute the code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit shift and enter, so that's where I'm able to type more without it executing the code. So a person has an age, so let's just say 23. The person has lucky numbers, and that will be an array of 1 and 3. And finally, let's just say a person has gender, and this gender we're going to just say male. So now I don't know if you've noticed something. We are creating objects, and if you notice that every object, I'm just going to print that out to the console. So this is an object. So you can see that it has properties. It has a name, it has age, it has lucky numbers, and it has gender. Now right off the bat, you will notice that the key is created like this. It can be any key you want. You can use anything you want, just that the key cannot be a number, so it has to be, so you can't have, let's say, 23 as a key. No, that won't work. So just know that a key is just anything other than special characters. So you can't have a dollar sign as a key. So as long as it's just alphanumeric, you're good to go. You can create your key with that. So the point I'm trying to drive across is that the value can be of any data type. So you're not limited to fixing your object to hold just one data type. So you can see age has a data type of number, gender has a data type of string, lucky number has a data type of array, and name has a data type of string. So the point here is that we've created a person object, and it has different attributes or different properties right there. A person has a name. We are not actually modeling a real human, because they are more to a human that meets the eye, but just know that these are the few attributes that we have for this person. All right, cool. So how do we access individual items from this object? Now, if I create an array, I'll just create an array of let's say 1, 2, 3, and to access an item from the array, we just have to look for the index of that item. And if I use 0, for example, it's going to return the first index. Remember, we start counting from 0 in JavaScript and in most programming languages. So you can see that it returns 0. So if I say array 2, then that's going to return 3 to me, right? So that's cool. So how do we do that? Well, I'm just going to backtrack here, and let's go to the console. So to access a property in an object, we use the dot notation. So look, I've typed console, and you can see there are different things that the console provides to me. So if I click enter now, you can see that we are having almost the same thing. In fact, I can say the same thing, because when we log the person, we have an object here. It's a type of object. When we log the console, we have a type of console. But if you notice, like, syntax wise, it's actually the same thing, because this console exposes all these objects. It exposes all these properties. It exposes assert, it exposes clear, it exposes count, it exposes log, which we've been using quite frequently throughout the course. So using the dot notation, I can just say console dot Then if I say log, then I can just say hello world. And if I hit enter, we get hello world. So in the same way, using the dot notation, because since it exposes log, we can actually come and say person. Let's just go person dot, then we can go with name. So person.name, and that will return John to us. Just like how we have console.log, because log is actually a function or a method that is actually chained to this. Alright, so that is cool. So in order to access a property from an array, sorry, from an object, you just need to type in the name of the object and the value or the key in which you want to access. So let's say we want to access age, we just say person.age and we get that. Now this is one way to access a value, or like to access a value using a key in an object. We can also use the array like syntax. So if I say person and square bracket, and now with a string I can access the property in which I want to access. So I can say lucky numbers, and that's why when I click enter, it will return that value for me based on the key that I specify. Now notice that the key, if you're using an array like syntax, the key has to be a string. There's no two ways about it. It has to be a string if you want to access the value using the array like syntax, which is this square bracket that we have here, the square bracket notation. You have to pass in the key that you're looking for as a string. Now if we type in something like this, I'll just say type, and if I hit enter, we're going to get undefined because type does not exist. But now there's a way to work about that, to work around that. We can actually add to this. We can actually add value to our person. Now remember, we've created the person's object, and there's no way we can actually come back to say we want to add maybe complexion or race. That's why we will have to refresh the browser and define this again, because remember we've defined it as a constant, and the only thing we can change is actually the values, but not actually the constant that we've created. So what do I mean? We can't actually say person is equal to, let's say, type test. That will throw an error because we're trying to reassign a constant variable, and we've seen that that is not possible. So how do we manipulate the object itself without actually changing the entire object? We can do that by saying person, and let's say we target the name. The name initially is John, but we can change that to, let's say, Frank. So just by doing this, person.name or person square bracket string name, whatever syntax you want to go with, it works. In fact, for that, I'm going to just show you that both syntax works. But I'm just going to execute this code now just to show that we can actually change the value of a property in an object, but not the object itself. It sounds confusing, but just take it as face value. So if I hit enter, you can see we get Frank back. And if I log to the console person, we're going to get Frank as the name instead of John, which we got, which was the original value for name. So you can see that by using this person.name, it actually returns two things to you. It returns a getter. So if we say person.name, this is the getter. So a getter is just a way of retrieving the value stored in this property or this key, and which is Frank. So if we come over here and say person name, I'm going to use the other syntax, and we assign it to a different name. Let's say Jane. This is a setter because now we are actually changing the value that is stored in this key. So the moment I hit enter, we get Jane back, and if I say person and log that to the console, you can see we get Jane. So in the same way that we are able to manipulate the value of a property or a key in an object, the same syntax we can create new keys and assign values to it. So in general, what this does is once we say person.name equal to Jane, it's gonna check under the hood. What JavaScript is gonna do is gonna check, okay, is there a key called name? Okay, then if it finds that there's a key called name, then what it's gonna do, instead of creating a new key called name, it's just gonna change the value of it's just going to replace the value of name with the new one you're trying to set. So if that key doesn't exist, what it's going to do, it's going to create that for you. So enough talking, let's put that to practice. So if we log person once more, you can see we have name, age, and we can do something like this. We can say objects, in case you want to know how many keys you have or how many properties you have in your object. You can just say object.keys, and all you need to do is just pass in the name of your object, and it's going to return an array of all the keys in your object. So we have name, we have age, we have lucky numbers, and we have gender. So now let's say we want to actually add the race of this person, but now we've already created the object, and there's no way to reassign that, since we've all actually made it a constant. And the only way we can do that is actually refreshing the page and losing all those memories. We don't want to do that. We just want to say person dot or square bracket, whatever syntax you want. So if I say person dot race, and all I need to do is just assign the race black. And so what this is going to do is going to check, does race exist? Is we check our array, race doesn't exist. So what it's going to do is just going to push this key to our object and add and set this as the value. So the moment I hit enter, you can see it returns black, just like how we've been getting the value that we added before. Now the cool thing is, the moment I log to the console the keys of person, you can see that race has been added. So let's actually log the object and see. So you can see that now race is now part of the object. So in case you probably made a mistake and maybe you're not done or whatever, you're creating a dynamic object. Remember that there's another form of creating dynamic objects. So I guess I'm just going to show you that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to log something to the, let's see. Now there are things you could do in the browser. So you can see alert, and let's just say hello. And if I hit enter, you can see I get an alert right here. So just like alert, you can also do some sort of confirmation or some prompts. So let's do prompts. So let's just say name. We create a constant called name, and we want to prompt and say, what is your name? And if I hit enter, you can see I get a prompt in the browser, and I can just type in my name. And in the moment I hit enter, it has stored my name into this variable. Now I can just say name, and it's going to print out my name for me. So now you might want to probably create a dynamic object. So let's do that. Let's create a dynamic object. Let's just say test, and we create a dynamic object. We're going to fill it with data later on. So we create a dynamic object, and there's nothing there, right? So if I log test, it will just return an empty object to me. So what I want to do is I'm going to copy this code once more, and the moment this is done, oh sorry, we've already created a constant called name, so we can't actually reassign that. So what I'm just going to do is name2, and I'm going to enter my name again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my test and say test.name is equal to name2. And the moment I log test to the console, you can see it has added name, which was dynamically generated to the object. So you're not limited to actually putting all the keys and the values that you want in your object. you can actually create your objects just like how we create a variable and it's in the state of undefined. Then later, maybe performing some calculations, you update the value of your variables later. Just the same case, we can also create an empty object and assign the value later. So that is everything for object. So I'm just going to log to the console person again, and you can see that initially we had just name, age, lucky numbers, gender. Then later we dynamically added race. And how do we do that? We said person dot race is equal to black. And what it's going to do is going to check, does race exist? If race doesn't exist, then it's going to create the key and assign the value to it. Else, if it exists, then it's just going to update the value of that key. And that's pretty much everything we need to know. Now, there's something I want to draw to our attention. If I log person to the console and I hit enter, and I'm just going to expand this, there's something called prototype. So this prototype is like a way of extending your objects to be how can I put it, to be unique to a particular to be unique to a particular instance of your object. So I'm going to show you a quick example of that. But before then, let's know that we can also add functions to our object. So let's say person dot get dob. So get dob stands for get date of birth. It's going to be a function, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to assign a function to that, and I'm just going to hit enter. And for now, what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to log to the console getting dob. And the moment I log person dot, sorry, not performance, person dot get dob, since it's a function now, we need to call it. Remember, in functions you have to call your functions. So the moment I hit enter, you can see we got getting dob. So but actually it would be cool if we can actually calculate the date of birth of this particular individual. Now let's see how we can do that. So I'm just going to call that function again, person dot get dob. Sorry, I'm going to create a function, and I'm going to use the normal function and click enter. Now I'm going to introduce you to the this keyword. So this keyword actually refers to this person. So by using this keyword, we can actually have access to this dot age, and that will give us the age of this current object. And to prove that that works, I'm just going to log this to the console, this dot age, hit enter, and call person dot get dob, and you can see we get 23, and that is because we define the age as 23. So in the case of this, it's actually referring to the object it is actually referencing to. So this is not actually this person. So I don't want to confuse you, but just know that this keyword is actually referring to the current scope. Okay, so if this was probably in another let's say another class or another object, it will refer to that object. So this is looking at the immediate scope, the immediate parent. So this stands for this uh, person object that we have here. So let's create that function to generate the date of birth. So I'll just call that again, get dob is equal to function. And if you notice, we're creating an anonymous function because this function here doesn't have a name. So we create a function, hit enter, and what we can do, we can just return we can hard code the year since it's 2023. Then all we need to do is just 2023 minus this dot age, and what we're going to do, we're just going to return the difference between the current year and our age, and that should return our date of birth. So if I hit enter, call get date of birth, you can see we get 2000 as the date of birth. Now let's call person dot age, and we set the age to 33. And I hit enter and call person dot get date of birth, we get 1990. So you can see our date of birth is actually dynamic, because based on the age that is there, it's going to it's going to calculate the date of birth for us. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much everything about objects. But now we can actually make our object more dynamic. Now this is going to be the last section of this video. I know it's already a long video, but we can actually create sub objects from our object. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create I'll create a person object. So I'll just call it, sorry, I'll create a user object. So I'm just going to call it user and give some properties there. So this is going to be name, and the value is going to be this. Sorry, let me just write the syntax properly. So this is how we write the syntax. We say we create a function. So let's write a function user. Now this function has to have the capital letter. Everything you're doing have to be capital letter. We can just say person. Let's just create person, and let's say this person should have a name, age, and gender. Then what we do inside here is that we just return name, and we say this the name, and that's it. So now I'm gonna go back to create that again, but I just want to show you something here. So if we say user is equal to new person, and I hit enter and I log user to the console, you can see that we've created a user object based on this person function that we created. I just want to show you that just like how we have new objects, we can also create our own object constructor. Okay, so let's just say user.name, and we say Caleb, for example. And if I log user, now you can see we got this, which is our object, and it has everything that we should have from this a normal object. So let's do that again. I'm just going to refresh and let's do that again. So let's create a function. We'll call it person. I don't want to confuse you, but let's just create this person. So we say name, we say age, and we have gender. Then what we do is we return an object with name, this dot name. So remember, this is actually referring to whatever object or whatever instance will be created from this object constructor, which is person that we're creating here. Please don't be confused. If you're confused, please rewatch the video over and over again till you get it. So we say this dot age. I messed up, so I'm just going to do that again. I'll copy this so I don't have to type it again. So refresh, paste that, write function here. Alright, let's go with gender, this dot gender. I'm just going to format the code properly. Alright, so now if I log person to the console, you can see that if I log that, it's actually just a normal function, right? With literally everything you know about functions. Just like if I log console, literally the same thing. Okay. So now, but the cool thing with creating your functions like this with the capital letter is that you can now create instance of this function, and it's going to automatically convert it to an object constructor. It's just the old way of creating classes, because JavaScript was not having the OOP convention, which is object-oriented programming. We're going to look at that later, which is a more easier way of doing stuffs. But for now, just know that you can actually do this. So let's create our first user. So let's say Jane is equal to new person, and we pass in everything that Jane needs. So her name is Jane, her age is 20, and her gender is female. So we have Jane. Let's create another user called John, new person. John is 24 and is a male. And we hit enter. Now if I log Jane to the console, Jane is literally we're getting undefined. Oh yeah, I know why that is happening. We're using the this keyword. We have to actually not use the this keyword. So I'm gonna still copy this because and refresh. Please pardon me. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna return without doing any of this. Alright, cool. So I'll create Jane. So let's create Jane is equal to new person, and we have a name Jane, age 20 and female. John, new person, John, 24, male. Alright, so let's log Jane to the console, and yes, so it's working fine now. So we have Jane and we have John. So these are really, we are creating new objects from this blueprint that we've created here. So just know that this is actually a blueprint for a person. Really, that's just everything. So let's see if we can do things for Jane. Let's say Jane dot race. Can we do something like this and say she's white? And we hit enter, and I say Jane, and you can see we have Jane and white, and her race is white. So let's log John and say John doesn't have race. I don't know if this is connecting to you, but we've created two different objects from this blueprint, and they must have a name, they must have an age, they must have a gender, but the race is optional. So it's not it's optional because you can see based from the same object, uh, a person, sorry, John doesn't have a race, but like based from the same object, they both have name, age, and gender, which are the required field. In fact, those are uh what they need. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense.